To say that feminism has overtaken mainstream culture is an understatement. Everywhere you look, the ideal woman is portrayed as a dominant, single, childless career woman, while at the same time, motherhood and marriage are demonized. The demonization and tearing down of men has gone hand in hand with the feminist empowered ideology. Men have been reduced to oppressive, sexist forces who solely exist to keep women from achieving their true potential and are people who women cannot form any genuine loving relationships with and must instead subjugate in order to achieve perfection. As a result of this, strong masculine men have basically been erased from our entertainment and pop culture, being replaced with submissive, weak men who simply let their more powerful, more capable, and more intelligent female compatriots just walk all over them without resistance. That's why it's not a surprise when young men are constantly being taught to hate themselves that they're going to push back in any way they can. They're going to seek out content that tells them the opposite. Because believe it or not, people don't like being told that they're inherently evil, especially when they have no ill intent. And so around 2020, the counterculture revolution known as the Red Pill movement started to gain massive traction online. The Red Pill movement sought to bring light to how men have been harmed by modern feminism and to bring to light the many issues that men face as a result of this that are not discussed in wider culture. It's received a lot of criticism from mainstream sources because it's a male positive movement, and in today's culture, feminism simply can't allow that type of thing to exist. But also, the Red Pill movement has genuine problems and it pushes some genuinely bad ideas. The Red Pill movement exists because there's a demand for it. Because men feel rejected by society. They are tired of being demonized as inherently misogynistic sexual deviants who simply view women for their sexuality. The majority of men don't think like that. They don't have desires like that, and yet they're being told constantly that they do and that they need to somehow atone for these sins that they never committed. And it's created a generation of very depressed and lonely men who feel like it's impossible to really be appreciated by women because of how feminism has influenced them. And so because of that, you have these movements like the Red Pill springing up. Content creators like Andrew Tate, Fresh and Fit, and the Whatever podcast have reached massive followings in a very short amount of time. They're saying stuff that a lot of men really want to hear. But as much as I empathize with the ideals behind the Red Pill movement, as much as I agree that men's issues are not discussed and are even actively suppressed by broader culture, and I agree that men are unfairly demonized and just neglected, the ideas that the Red Pill movement espouses are really just the same bad ideas that feminism spouts, but you just flip the genders. And I'll show you some examples of this. Okay, so I want to start off with the good parts of the Red Pill movement before I start to criticize it, because there are good parts, genuinely. I think the Red Pill movement has this edge over feminism in a lot of ways, and the Red Pill movement is extremely good at identifying the problems facing men. It is incredibly good at pointing out how society and modern feminism have disadvantaged men, how it's left men behind, and how men are suffering emotionally, physically, and mentally and spiritually because of it. It's great at identifying and bringing light to, the extremely high rate of male suicides, the extremely high rate of virgin men, the extremely high rate of men who have never been in a relationship, the extremely high rate of men who were screwed over in divorce, the extremely high standards that a lot of women have, and the toxic ideals that feminism puts into women's minds. All of that is true. All of that has been buried by the mainstream establishment culture because it's inconvenient to feminism. And it's absolutely true that there has been a concerted effort to demonize men. All of that stuff is true. And the Red Pill movement allows an outlet for those ideas, which many men, including myself, have noticed for years and thought that we were just going crazy because everyone else was acting like it didn't exist or shaming us for thinking that way. And so when you go online and you see these people talking about that and you see all the people in the comments who agree with that, all of a sudden it feels like, whoa. I wasn't crazy. I'm not alone. And that's a wonderful feeling. It really is. I think it's good that we have movements like this, at least in principle. Men are really suffering, and attention isn't being drawn to it by the media. So it's up to the internet and counterculture, I guess you could call it, and independent entities to kind of pick up that slack. And I know for me personally, a lot of not necessarily red pill channels. It was more like conservative leaning channels or more just like commentary channels I've listened to really helped me kind of understand all of these emotions I was having, all of these issues. They helped me kind of process that and understand that like I wasn't crazy and that all of like this despair and this stuff I felt was there was good reason for me to feel that way because in mainstream circles men aren't allowed to express these ideals because then they get written off as sexist or like, oh, why should we care about men, blah blah blah. I mean, if you guys remember, I'm sure you've heard of it. There was that shoe on head video, male loneliness epidemic, went giga viral a couple months ago. Everybody and their mother was making a reaction video to it. You see the comments from people and the vitriol and the hatred that a lot of these feminists have for men, completely dismissing their concerns, laughing at the suicide rate, labeling them all as R words. It shows how difficult it is to express these feelings as a man in any kind of mainstream circle because it's just not talked about. All of the talking points is about how women have it so hard, how women are oppressed, how men are so bad, and as a result, no consideration is given to the thoughts of the oppressor because they're bad. Who cares about them anyway? That's the problem, is because men have been so ostracized and forced out of these spaces, the spaces that are forming are like equally as guarded. They're equally as walled off. And as a result, the red pill movement has evolved into basically the very thing it was trying to overcome. It started pushing the very same ideas that caused this to happen in the first place.
One of the things you have to understand, and a lot of women don't understand this, and I brought this up when we were having sushi the other day. Dr. David Buss, one of my favorite surveys of all time, he talks about when men cheat and when women cheat in a marriage. When men cheat or when men don't cheat, they report the same level of satisfaction in the marriage. When women cheat, they report lower satisfaction in the marriage 78% of the time. And for those of you who remember your statistics class, 68% is one standard deviation. So outside of one standard deviation, they're reporting lower satisfaction in the marriage. That means when men cheat, it is not to end the relationship. When women cheat, it is to end the relationship. And so that's another thing. Like a man will go through these different cycles. Again, of course, we don't need comfort in order to have sex, and we can completely separate sex from intimacy as men. And a lot of women don't understand that. And if a man screws up and he has sex with another woman, or he, exercises his options or whatever, in that case, he's not looking to go home and then leave his wife or his kids because of it.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
Okay, so this is something that's pretty commonly seen among a lot of red pill channels is this justification of men cheating on women and at the same time also explaining that women cheating on men is bad. This is basically the exact same as a feminist talking point. Like, have you ever seen those articles where it's like, oh, an affair saved my marriage, or why women should be allowed to cheat on their husbands, and blah, 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 blah. They frame it as like an empowerment thing when it's a justification of infidelity. And this is the exact same thing the red pill guys are doing. I don't care if men are not cheating because they're not dissatisfied in the marriage. That doesn't matter. You're not supposed to cheat in a marriage. You're not supposed to cheat on your spouse, whether you're a man or a woman. Again, it's the feminist talking point of women should be allowed to cheat on their husbands, but you just reverse the genders. So now it's men should be allowed to cheat on their wives. It's just as hypocritical. It's just as bad for your relationship, and yet it's being portrayed as a positive thing. And this is like the core of my frustration with the red pill movement is it's identified the problems that men face, but it's given men the same bad solutions that feminism gave women. You're just swapping out one bad ideology for another. It's like, let's look at some of the talking points of like general feminist rhetoric versus the talking points of general manosphere or red pill rhetoric. Let me know if any of these sound familiar to you. Feminism says you don't need men. Never get in a relationship or just use them for short-term sex. The red pill movement says women are beneath you. Focus on the grind and just go out and hook up on the weekends. Both of them are demonizing long-term committed relationships. One because it's suppressive, and one because, you're just better than it, or women will, like, hold you down or whatever. It's the same thing. You're just switching the genders. Let's go for another example. Feminism says family is an oppressive tool of the patriarchy, and true empowerment comes from rejecting family and focusing on your career before anything else. The Red Pill movement says family is an excuse for women to leech off of your success. True freedom comes from the grind and achieving your own personal status and success. Again, still demonization of the nuclear family from both sides. You're just switching the genders. Feminism says men are sex obsessed pigs who only see you as a sack of meat and are itching to assault you the first chance they get. They will never see you as an actual person. The Red Pill movement says women are manipulative liars who only care for your status and will throw you to the wolves the moment they find another man who they can leech off of more successfully. So again, we have a demonization of the opposite gender here. It's the same argument. It's, X group is inherently bad. Do not engage with X group. You're just switching places. And while it's certainly true that there are men who are sex obsessed pigs who only see women as sacks of meat, and it is true that there are women who are manipulative liars who only care for a man's status and will throw him to the wolves the moment they find another man, but it's being extended to represent all men and all women. And that is the problem of feminism. And now it's just being repeated here with the red pill. This is why I'm frustrated with it, is because the problems that they identify are real and it's true. And the reason why it's so popular is because men have been so underserved, and there's a huge percentage of lost young men out there who need something like this. But it's giving them bad ideas. It is giving them the same crap that feminism has been feeding women. This is not how you counter feminism, especially because red pill content particularly heavily attacks long-term committed relationships and marriages especially. And while they do make some good points about, like, for example, in the video I'm about to talk about, how men get a pretty raw deal when it comes to marriage, at least in the legal system. They demonize it the same way women do, feminism does, as like a oppressive tool.
Yeah, I just think marriage is an L. In today's day and age, I mean, there's obviously the tradition component if you're religious, but when it comes to the government involvement and the potential financial ramifications of having to unwind a marriage, it does not make sense. Just a couple quick stats on the marriage thing. 50% of marriages end in divorce. 80% of divorces are initiated by women. 90% if she's college educated. 90% of child support payments go from men to women. 97% of alimony payments go from men to women. So I think marriage is a pretty big L for men, and they get absolutely crushed in the court system. Prenuptial agreements can get thrown out. So even if you do have a prenuptial agreement, they can definitely be thrown out. They're not bulletproof. So don't get married, guys. Don't do it.
Again, he identifies a good problem, which is that the court system is heavily biased towards women in cases of divorce, and it basically leaves men getting screwed over every time when they get divorced. And don't get me wrong, that is a massive, massive societal issue. I totally agree. But the solution here is don't get married. Don't even have a committed relationship. Just sleep around. That's not what we should be telling people. What we should do about this is try to change the laws. We should ask for stuff like mandatory paternity tests. We need to change the laws so that they don't favor the women so heavily every single time. So that you can't just throw a prenup out. The solution is not to abandon marriage, because that's the bedrock of society. If you don't have nuclear families, you don't have a society. It is going to collapse. And that's what frustrates me. The red pill movement is just feeding men the same bad ideas that the feminism movement is feeding women. But the difference is the red pill movement has the advantage of men being genuinely down because of modern society. Because of that, they probably have some bitterness in their heart already towards women. They are already kind of desperate for anything that kind of validates them, because there's not any of it out there. So they're gonna be more likely to listen to these things, especially when The Red Pill movement continues to correctly identify the issues, which lends legitimacy to them because, yeah, you identify the problem correctly. You explain the problem correctly. What he just said about the stats about divorce, all of that is true. There's nothing wrong about that. But then he immediately follows that up with "don't get married, guys," which is a terrible ideal to be instilling in your audience. The Red Pill movement is feminism reflected back at itself. It shows just how bad the ideas of feminism are. And what we need content that affirms men, that shows the world the problems that feminism has caused for men, but that continues to explain the value of traditionality in regards to relationships, marriage, long term relationships, not sleeping around. Because I see the red pill guys promoting these same double standards that the feminism movement will use. All you're going to do is create a bunch of women hating men that are going to go and fight with the men hating women, and then there's nothing that's going to be accomplished. The gender war is just going to continue, and if we're fighting each other, neither of us are going to win. You know, men and women can't afford to be each other's enemies. That's why I ultimately can't support the Red Pill movement. The Red Pill movement has become its own enemy. And both extremes, and I think they are extremes, demonize the only thing that should be uniting men and women, which is the desire to preserve the traditional nuclear family, to preserve the sanctity of marriage, and all of these virtues that society was built off of. The virtues that made the West so great. And both sides demonize marriage. Both sides demonize the other. Both sides justify cheating and demonize it when the other cheats. But I think the Red Pill movement is only going to grow because mainstream society continues to refuse to discuss these issues, and then they criticize the Red Pill movement as being, misogynistic, which, yeah, it is sometimes. Like, that criticism is correct. But the problem is, when these people call something misogynistic, they've called like everything misogynistic. So no one's going to take that criticism seriously at all, especially when feminism pushes the same ideals, and those same people will turn around and praise feminism for that same toxic behavior. And so, because of that, that criticism is just going to force people to dig in more, dig in harder, to protect the spaces that they've built. And I understand that desire because the leftist criticism, everything is racist, everything is sexist, everything is homophobic. You don't take it seriously anymore because they've diluted the meaning of those words so much. So what if they call the red pill movement misogynistic for caring about men, right? Even if some of the criticisms are actually legitimate for once. And so that's why we really need a middle ground. We desperately need a middle ground, and I hope to be that. My last video was about how feminism hurts women, and this video is about how the red pill movement hurts men. And the reason why they hurt women and men is because they both demonize the family. They both encourage their followers not to marry, not to have children, not to be faithful to your spouse or to your girlfriend or boyfriend. When that's what would truly bring people together. That should be the true goal. The solution is not a world where women are just sex toys for men. And the solution is not a world where men are submissive, weak slaves who just do whatever mistress tells them. And yet, both of these ideologies are pushing basically one extreme or the other. It's classic horseshoe theory, which is that both extremes are essentially the same in function, even if they are different in like how they got there. Like the far right and the far left are the same in terms of like the policies they implement and this what like societies they build, but the logic that they use to come to them is different. That's what's happened here. And so I hope on this channel to kind of offer that perspective of yes, men are suffering in today's world, but we need to be able to make amends with women. We need to preserve the traditional family. We need to preserve traditional relationships. We need to stop glorifying hookup culture, whether it's men sleeping with a bunch of women or women sleeping with a bunch of men. It's the same. It's harmful for both groups. And so, this is why, unfortunately, even though it really pains me to do this, I have to criticize the Red Pill movement. Even though it means taking the side, or not really taking their side, but like using the same criticisms that the leftists do. So it looks kind of like I'm taking their side. And that hurts my soul. Having to agree with leftists on anything, it hurts, man. I love nothing more than to tell them to shut up and join my boys, but I can't. I can't. Not in good conscience. We need an alternative. The solution is not to go to war with women. We need to be able to make peace, and the Red Pill movement is committed to continuing the fight. So anyway, I know this was kind of a downer video, but thanks for watching. Subscribe, like, comment down below. What do you think? Do you like what I said? Do you not like what I said? Let me know, but please do so respectfully. And that'll be it for me. I'll see you all next time, and have a great day.